I think that there's a certain point for me when I'm making a work, and getting to that point is always, a lot. I was thinking about our discussions. Siddhartha does come to my studio all the time. I read his work and edit his writing all the time.
Sometimes past midnight.
Like last night, I was reading his
work.
And
do you listen to her?
I listen. I'm a very good listener.
He's
And do you listen to him?
Yes. I mean, not always. That's not true. You don't always listen to me. That's not true. But I would say that one of the things that I think is really fascinating in working with him creatively on his own work is he's an incredibly quick editor. He changes things so quick. I mean, I'll say, I think that, and he'll go, deep, and he'll just erase it. Or he moves everything around at this amazing speed, and there's this incredible willingness to recreate the work in the moment. And one of the things that I found fascinating and amazingly creatively brave about the book is that if you read the first chapter of this book, I think every single page is different. I mean, the first draft. And I remember when his book came out and we had a little party, I said that it was amazing how he changed, the willingness to change, which I think is so crucial in making a successful work of art, was amazing that the book had totally changed. And his editor gave us a talk afterwards and said, well, if he changed every page, he knew what he was doing the whole time. And it's just but also this idea that you need to know what you're doing is actually, I think, overrated in some ways. That that of course he knew what he was doing, but actually you think if the creative process takes its full force, that as the maker, there is this humble side to it, where you know that, as you were talking about, for me, there's a moment where the work you're having a conversation with the work, getting it to that point where...
And work talks back to you, right?
talks back to you. And the work, I think, for me, the most interesting thing in my work is always what I least expected to have happen, and I recognize as being interesting, and then keep or frame in a certain way. And I think one of the things that's incredible about visual art and seeing visual art is that, and I think it's true in writing, absolutely, is when you're reading or you're looking at it, that moment of the unexpected in the work is actually translated to the viewer and translated to the reader.
Yes, absolutely.
And you know as you're reading it that this could not have been planned,
right.
That it happened in the moment. And do you want me to talk a little about
yes,
this idea?
Absolutely.
The second part of this is that I think something that's interesting. Oops, plug in or find another. Should we
plug in or find another power source?
The second thing that I was going to talk about in relation to this idea is I think that both of us are in our work, and I'll talk about me in particular, I'm interested in this idea of the work being actually about experimentation, that a work actually manifests a quality of experimentation, so that when you experience it, you have the sense that this has to do with shifting scale. It's not just a scale, but this the experience of the work of actually being caught in a moment where something is perhaps growing or dying, succeeding or failing, moving or standing still. So this is actually, I put this up, this is a piece I did in the Venice Biennale. I just put it up because now I'm doing it again, and this is in 1998. And
it was in the bigger show.
It was in now I'm doing the pavilion, but it was in the group show.
Right.
And the idea that I was thinking of was this idea that I would put up lights first, and that the work would that work was almost had this idea of a life force, like it was alive. I mean, it's a very old idea in sculpture. How do you breathe life into an inanimate object? And I was interested and always been interested in this idea of how an experience becomes valuable and how an object becomes valuable, and to make an actual artwork where it felt like it had a life source, or felt like it behaved with some kind of need for sustenance. So the idea was that the piece would accumulate around light, and then would speed to sort of survive and get to another point and accumulate. This obviously maps things like the way urban environments grow, like viruses grow, but then the other idea in this piece was that it went out this window, which I discovered and opened, much like opening
No, it's
the
like
window
what happens
there.
upstairs, right?
And there was an arm that went into the water. And this
Someone said that Sarah Sze never met a wall that she didn't want to break.
and it had an arm that went out into the water, and it bounced on the water, and it tapped back on the window. So this idea that it almost felt like the piece itself was an experiment. This was a really fundamental idea in this piece that I did at the High Line, where it's called a model for a habitat, and it was interesting, this idea of like a scientific model, or are you modeling behavior? Are you modeling the way something might become? And I wanted to make a piece, but it was really an experiment. The High Line, I think, is an incredibly successful experiment in urban space, period. And it was really this question of what could you add to it? Does it need artwork? It is, and it really successful in my mind, kind of artwork in itself. And so the challenge of not making something that was really just like plop art, and that you don't really need there, because it's such an incredible experience. So I thought, the one thing that it's framed this incredible natural environment that even used to exist there. But the one thing that it hasn't framed is the fact that there is actually this very vibrant wildlife of birds, bees, butterflies that survive everywhere in our city, and particularly this is like a locus for that. So to make almost a sculpture that framed their existence. So I made this.
It's making you see something that you otherwise might not see. That's the point.
Well, also, that's everywhere around you. Right. I mean, one of the funny things is that this apparently is the most photographed place in the High Line, and it's mostly people photographing a bird when they see it. How many times do you see a bird in New York? All the time. But all of a sudden, there's a bird. Let's get a picture with it. So this idea of drawing your attention to their presence was really the idea. And obviously, scale shifts. I mean, this piece is very related to the work upstairs in terms of perspective, in terms of having you go to a minute piece of bird seed to the point at the tip of the Empire State Building, for example. And the last point that I think is interesting to me about experiment was I wanted people to engage, that it should always be, like the experience had to be an engagement with that experience in space. So the final kind of solution, when I kept thinking like this is set for failure to do a sculpture on the High Line, because you can't compete with the location. So the final thing that I think was like sort of an aha moment in terms of conceptualizing it was, okay, it's a promenade, and one of the great things again is what they didn't do. They did nothing. You walk there. That's all you do. You have no choices. You can only walk. So to make the promenade actually bisect the piece itself, so that you see it, you enter it, you leave it, and that the piece grows from north to south on one side and south to north on the other.